Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Good morning, y'all. Thank you for tapping in for some real talk from the heart this morning. Our real talk this morning is from Psalm 77. It's a psalm of Asaph, and this psalm right here was just really, encouraging my heart this morning in a great way. I don't have time to read the whole psalm, of course, because this is a short devotion, but I want to give you really a summation or a summary of some of the things and some of the takeaways here that I found encouraging my heart this morning. And first off is that you see the psalm beginning with Asaph crying out to God. He says, I cried out to the Lord. He says, with my voice, right? To God. I cried out to him and he heard me. He talks about in the day of his trouble, he sought the Lord. This psalm right here, man, it gives us great instructions about how to deal with anguish, how to deal with agony of heart when we're going through things, because that's a part of life, right? All of us go through anguishing times, man. We go through times of deep pain and hurt. And he says here, man, that in the midst of his anguish, he cried out to God. He didn't cry around. He cried out to God, and he sought the Lord. He says it twice here in this psalm about him seeking the Lord, man. Just, getting his attention and focus on just craving God and going after him in that season of anguish. His need was not more sleep, as you see there. He's actually talking about my hand was stretched out in the night without ceasing. He talks about again about in the night seeking the Lord. We don't need more sleep when we are going through agony and anguish, man. What we need is to pray without ceasing, man. We need to really lay hold of the Lord in those times where, man, life is trouble and we are going through some deep pain and anguish. He says here, I complained and my spirit was overwhelmed. When we give ourselves to complaining, what we are doing is we are inviting a sense of just being overwhelmed in our situation. And we could, if we're not careful, we will, in the season of pain and anguish, man, we will just become complain champions, man. We will just complain and complain and complain. And simultaneously, there's just this sense of overwhelmingness that comes upon us. And so we got to guard our hearts from that. What Asaph chose to do, and you can actually see it as you read there, I remembered God. He says, I called to remember. I considered the days of old. Man, he got to a place where he couldn't even mouth words in prayer. He says, I was so troubled that I couldn't speak, he says. But what I could do is I could call to mind. And he uses that phrase again. I will call to mind. I will remember. I will meditate. And again, he says in verse 10, when you pick it up in verse 10, I said, this is my anguish. He says, but this is my anguish, but I will remember, he says. I like that. I will remember the years of the right hand of the Most High. Now, who is seated at the right hand of the Most High? The Lord Jesus Christ, man. So we don't give ourselves over to complaining, but instead we choose to remember the right hand of the Most High. In the midst of our anguish, we choose to meditate and to talk about the work of the Lord. That's what he says here. I will also meditate on all your work and talk of your deeds. And so my conversation is not going to be complaining. My conversation is going to be, listen, the faithfulness of God and the gratefulness or the greatness of God, and that we are grateful, right, for that. And that's really what you see here going on here. But then he talks about this. I love, there's a little nugget here in the midst of this that really spoke to my heart this morning. It's in verse 13, Psalm 77, verse 13. He says, your way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Right, that's the word sanctuary means a set apart place, and it's a picture of, listen, of holiness. And so when we look at of being in the midst of a season of pain and anguish and agony, this is the one thing that we cannot let go of. It is our intimacy with God. His way is in the sanctuary, man. We need to get there. We need to be there with the Lord. Do not let go of intimacy with God, because intimacy with God in the midst of what you're going through is what God is going to use to get you through. And I know that from personal experience, and I know some of you as well know that. Remember that he is great. Remember that he does wonders, and that's what he goes on to say here. Who is so great a God as ours? You are the God who does wonders. And then he begins talking about God's strength there in verse 14, and about redemption in verse 15. And, you know, don't let go of God's strength, because it's God's strength that's going to get you through what you're going through. Twofold: intimacy and strength. And I believe those two are intertwined, man. You cannot separate those two. When you are intimate with God, you are going to be strong in God. And you are going to be dependent and relying upon his strength in the middle of that difficult time, that difficult season that you're going through in life. And so don't let go of that. And another thing is, don't let go of his leading, because it says right here, you led your flock. You led your people like a flock. The tendency when we're going through difficult times, the tendency when we're going through painful seasons of life, is we let go of God leading us, and we want to take matters in our own hands, and we want to fix the situation. We need to let God lead us where he will lead us. And here, man, I want to see you another thing that stuck out to me. It says, your way was in the sea, your path in the great waters. When God is leading you, he may even lead you through some deep waters. But you need to know this: he is leading you. And you need to let him lead you. And he will get you to where, right, you were supposed to be. And what I like about this text too is, check this out. It says this: your way was in the sea, your paths in the great waters. And it says this: and your footsteps were unknown. I mean, God carries us through deep waters. And sometimes we forget that, man, it's his footsteps that's carrying us through, and we don't even really realize it. And so let him lead you. Let him give you strength. Stay intimate with him. Keep crying out to him. Keep dependent on him in that time of trouble that you find yourself in. And listen, cry out to the Lord. He says, I cried out to the Lord. He doesn't say I cried around. He says, I cried out to God, not to people. I cried out to God, and he heard my voice. That's what it says there. And I want to encourage you with that today. If you find yourself in the midst of an anguish and a pain in your life, beloved, cry out to God. That's the relief. That's the refuge. That's the stronghold. And remember these exhortations. Remember these exhortations. The next time, maybe you say, well, I'm not in a season of anguish right now. Hey, you're going to be, because that's life. Or maybe, listen, you have a brother or sister, right? You have a friend that is in the midst of a season of anguish. Encourage them with these exhortations right here. That they don't need to run to the pipe. They don't need to run to the pills. They don't need to run to the bottle or whatever else in that season of anguish. They can run to the Lord. They can cry out to him, and he hears them. And they can give themselves to seeking the Lord, just giving themselves over to that, meditating, remembering the Lord, his greatness, his goodness, his faithfulness. And then you remind them that life is about being intimate with God. And when them anguishing times come, it's that intimacy and that strength that's going to carry them through, because it's God himself that's carrying them through. His way is in the sanctuary. His way is in those deep waters, but his footsteps are unknown. Why? He's carrying you. He's carrying you, beloved. Hey, the Lord loves you. I love you too, man. Praying for you. Please be praying for me as well. I hope you have a great Saturday, and man, I hope you have a great Sunday in the house of God with God's people. All right, God bless y'all, man. I'll talk to you later.